This is Milepost. I'm Tomi Oladipo. It's a musical journey on this episode. Cobhams Asuquo is all-in-one: singer, songwriter, composer, and producer. He took a breather from his studio in Lagos to speak to us on this podcast. So Cobhams, good to speak to you.
Thank you, Tomi. Good to be here with you.
It's been a while since I followed what you were up to, but in the midst of all the pandemic craziness, I saw this video of you doing a cover of this song, Nobody.
Nobody, 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 nobody. I can use a fourth word harmony. Let's go. Nobody, 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 nobody.
And I was truly fascinated by it. How did that go? That was just random, I'm sure.
It was random, actually. It was random. So, I have these moments of, I'm not sure what to call them, but just these feats of random ideas. And I have a great team, and they encourage my moments of madness, if you will. And so I just thought, you know what? Let's just get behind the piano and kind of show people how this thing is done. Nobody, 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 no. Let me give him some verse. I don't want to hear say you did with another man. And make it fun and just, cut my own version of the song. I thought it was a great song. Nobody, when they
very
put it
catchy.
Yeah, I thought it was a very catchy song. And I just wanted to do something with it. Got into the studio. The engineer was there, just rigged and ready. And I was like, oh, why not? Let's have fun. And then, let's do it for the people and share it with them. I didn't know it was, going to catch on fire and just become something to talk about.
Lovely. So what are you working on at the moment? What's been taking up your time?
Well, there's a lot of things I've been working on. On the music side, I've been working on an album, which is unlike anything I've done. It's my own personal album, but it's also a collaborative effort. I've been working with a lot of musicians in the Afrobeat space in Nigeria and hopefully outside of Nigeria. So as it stands, I have on the bill right now artists like Tubaba, Two-Face Dibia, that is, Yemi Alade, Oladipo, the Bella Shmurda, Timmy Fowles, and believe it or not, even Toke Makinwa, who a lot of people don't know that, she's got a singing streak in her, but I was able to get her into the studio and we were able to craft something beautiful. So I've been working on that, and that's an exciting album, which just recognizes Afrobeats with some perspective and some context that is sort of the music that I create, which is for the most part very diverse, but also very alternative to Afrobeats. So I've been doing that. I'm really excited about that. It's a project called With Love from Lagos. Also, outside of that, on the advocacy side, I've been doing quite a lot of work with UNICEF Nigeria as an ambassador, advocating for the rights of children in terms of just the different things that, affect children, especially at times such as these very interesting times we're in, where while we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, children, happen to miss, other important, vaccination shots, like, for, the things like measles and polio and all of these other things. So just engaging people, stakeholders to have children better represented, Nigerian children better represented. We have a huge population of children who are out of school. We need to pay more attention to obviously girl child education and empowerment. So there's a lot of work to do in that regard. So I'm very happy to be partnering with UNICEF Nigeria to do that. I've also been doing some work. I've done some work in recent times with the EU and ROLAC, which is the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Program. Pretty much geared towards sensitizing people against gender-based violence. So
Right.
yes, so there's quite a lot of that that's been going on. I've been doing my best to be a loving husband and a good father. so
Lovely.
so there's been quite a bit going on in my life. But I'm particularly excited about, just being able to make, music that I think a lot of people will find shocking, but I find very expressive and very different from the kind of music I've been creating, with
Mm.
these artists that I've been working with. So yeah, that's just a sneak peek of
Uh,
what's been going on, at what's been going on in my life.
Interesting. Before we dig into the music, just on the sort of advocacy side, what is that like? Because a lot of the time we hear sort of artists and people like that being associated or being called, for example, ambassadors, and so practically that means what? What exactly does that entail?
Yeah, so I suppose the primary reason why you would even be chosen for that sort of role is the fact that, the recognition of the fact that you have some kind of clout and that, you can use it for good and for something that's bigger than, just sort of your own personal gains or whatever. So for me, I think it's just about everything I'm called upon to do. Obviously, there's a roster, and there's certain things. I've had the privilege of meeting with kids, in homes where they're being, better reformed and things like that, and just, to encourage them and, to be with them. I also use the music. It also gives for me a sense of accountability in terms of the kind of material I create, because as a producer and as a musician, performing artist, the material that I create is consumed by, all and sundry, and it's important that holistically speaking, children are taking into consideration in terms of the quality and the content of, the material that I create. So it's in, sort of these little ways. And then, of course, yes, engaging government officials, where necessary, and the powers that be, to have meaningful conversations, about how to better represent children. I mean, protect the rights of children. It leaves you with mixed feelings, because for some people, it's, no more than a courtesy call.
Mm.
Just another item, on their calendar. But for me, it leaves me with a great sense of burden and a great sense of responsibility, because I am who I am, because certain people paved the way for me to enjoy some of the benefits that I enjoy today as a person living with, disability. So I can imagine children, especially vulnerable children, and the need for proper representation and the need for someone to table, their matters of interest, just so that, they're properly looked after. And I can't think of a better way to build a safer future.
Mm.
So for me, it's out of a sense of responsibility and a sense of burden, and that then means that in whatever way I'm called to sort of represent or to sort of show up, that's exactly what I do.
Yeah, good to hear. Good to hear. So you say you're working on material, trying to put this album together. Would that be your what second or
It would be my second
third?
album,
Second, yeah,
yes.
second.
Mm.
Okay. When you're working as an artist versus a producer, what's the how do you go about it? Because I mean, generally, you work as a producer, you have certain tunes or certain concepts you have in mind. How do you decide, for example, what you would keep for yourself versus what you would give to an artist who comes to work with you?
So I never decide to keep or give. If I'm working with an artist and there's a splendid idea, because I believe that there's an infinite bank of ideas. You literally pull these things from the cloud. I think God, or whatever force, whoever people believe in. I believe in God. So I'd say God gives ideas, and they're fresh and new as often as you want them. And so, when I have a fresh idea, I just share it, and then if I need an idea for myself as an artist, I just sort of let myself get back into that zone. So I do the things I love to do, whether it's waking up early in the morning or whether it's being in motion, in my car or wherever, and just allowing myself to be inspired. So I don't keep some ideas and then give some ideas out. I just as the ideas come, I feel like they come for a purpose, and I just let them go to whoever can best actualize them, and just give them a voice. But in terms of working as an artist, nobody told me it'd be this it's quite difficult because
Mm.
first of all, you answer to yourself. So when you answer to an artist or someone else other than yourself, there's a sense of accountability. But when you answer to yourself, there's a tendency to procrastinate and put things off and do them when and then it's kind of like carrying out your own surgery and delaying it for fear of pain. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And yeah, so it pretty much is like carrying out your own surgery. You're trying to give yourself a haircut. You know what I mean? It's quite an experience. But I find that I have to grow into being an artist, and in a lot of cases making my own music. So it's been a growing experience for me, and I've finally gotten to the point where I'm starting to enjoy it. It was tough to get into. It was tough to sort of direct myself and to sort of, and
Because you were a producer first, right?
I'm a producer. Yes, I'm a producer. At least I've been a producer, all my life. As far as I'm up until this time. So yeah, there's also the tendency to want to overproduce and to want to look at and listen to everything from a producer's perspective. So there's all of those dynamics to manage, and it is quite tasking. But I feel like you get the hang of it over time, because there are artists who have done that over the years. I mean, Stevie Wonder is a prolific producer, but he's also been, a successful artist. So have, quite a number of people, when you think about it. So it's not something that hasn't been done before. So I'm kind of drawing strength from, such precedents, but it is quite tasking, to be honest.
Well, I get the sense you seem confident in your own creativity.
Yeah, I think I am. I think I'm confident in my own creativity. And I think that stems from a number of, I think it stems from the fact that I allow myself to consume a very, very wide spectrum of music. And so I have a lot of perspective and a lot of context, when I create. I feel like I continue to build my understanding of music. So I've enjoyed, music from Hildegard and Sufi mystics and things like that, to deep throat Tibetan singing, to, Tchaikovsky and Haydn and Bach and Handel and Mozart and all of that, up until this time when, I listen to Roddy Rick and Da Baby and Lil Baby and, Lil Yachty, Lil Pump, and cats like that. So it's been all kinds of things from Louis Armstrong to Jill Sample to Anita Baker to Mariah Carey to Jay-Z and Beyonce to, Dua Lipa. So I feel like when you allow yourself, when you immerse yourself in, that quality and that depth of music, and you also understand the skill to create, and you also possess the skill to recreate music and the intelligence to give the music that you recreate your perspective. I feel like, and you're kind of armed with the necessary tools to be a clever creator. And if you're in that position, coupled with the fact that, you're still in demand after 20 years of production, which in Nigeria is quite a feat, unto itself, because you know how it goes. You're here today and you're gone tomorrow, and so that gives you some sense of confidence in just being able to evolve and being able to continue to create music that people want to listen to.
Now that you mentioned the longevity, I remember I first came across you. I mean, I'd heard songs that you were involved in before, but I didn't necessarily know who you are or that you were involved in them. But I first came across you properly in that wave of the mid to late 2000s. I think it would have been Lagimore, the Rooftop MC's song, and I think there's that part of the bridge where you come in, and I was wondering who's this guy with a sort of rock country voice, but it was also very different at the time, because the Afrobeat music at the time was taking shape in a certain way, and then this is, Rooftop MCs came with this very different song, and then there was your voice, which was even more distinct. So yeah, it's interesting that all this time you're still able to keep it going.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, sometimes I describe myself as the candle that glows less brightly, but it's sort of almost always there, and doesn't dim quickly at the same time. And I'm okay with it. I think for me it's important to just continue to create, because I love to make music. And I'd hate one of those experiences where you have this moment of big shine, and then you're just sort of put out by culture, or the wave, or age, or whatever it is that puts people out of business these days. I think for me, I just enjoy being able to continue to create music. And like I told you, I've been listening to music for such a long time, and I've enjoyed everything, from Fleetwood Mac to Ace of Base to, Oasis to, just everything to, the Osbournes and this Black Sabbath. And so I want to be able to always, I see myself as someone who enjoys, the history of, Nigerian music, from a bird's eye view, just watching people come, watching people go, and sort of being part of that creative force that continues to shape, the music that people listen to. For me, it's really exciting. It's beyond staying in business and all of that. It's observing and being able to document and being able to keep alive the history of a growing culture of music appreciation.
Interesting. But it wasn't such a straightforward journey, because you were training to be a lawyer at a point, and then from being a serious Nigerian to becoming a very unserious Nigerian, and stopped combing your hair and got into music. How did that happen?
It's interesting you mentioned combing your hair. I was writing a song about combing my hair this morning. Yes, and how that's something I've totally given up on altogether. So I think for me,
I should feature on that one.
You should, absolutely, shouldn't you? I think for me, it's a matter of music finding you. Music is kind of like water. It'll always find its level. You can't trap water. It'll find a way. It'll find an outlet. And I think for me, that's what music has been. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I think partly because I did well in school and I wanted to impress my dad and things like that. But and I just saw myself. You're raised in an African family. You think of what's dignifying and what's next level and what's big and what makes the family proud and makes you the most money and such and such. But as I progressed, certain circumstances forced me to reevaluate life. I had admission to a university in Macon, Georgia, and I lost it on very interesting grounds. And I just began to wonder, the value of some of these things. And I found myself in Unilag, where my admission was taking forever to be processed, even though I started to attend classes. And I was at a place where I was like, so what is this? What is this life? What is this thing that you think you're in, but you're never really in? There you are, attending classes, but never really properly matriculating, and just some of the interesting things that were happening in my life. But music was constant. Music is probably one of the most constant things in my life. Besides my, in times of heartbreak, in times of, just name it. Music has been constant. And so even at these times, music was also constant. And I said to myself, look, you've got to be honest with yourself. This is the one thing that has not failed you. Every time you leave school, you go to the studio, you make music for artists. You're treated with respect. You have star status, and then you come back to school. Nobody knows you. You're trying to get in. It's a bit of a tricky situation, and you kind of let the whole music, everything die. And then I wrote like 15 letters to God, just voicing my frustration and all of that stuff. I wonder where those letters are. And at some point, I just said, what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to. And I was faced with it because I generally had done well in school, and dropping out of school was for people who quote unquote failed at the whole endeavor altogether. And here I was, this a student of sorts, deciding to leave school to pursue an uncertain path. But I figured I didn't have much of a choice. I had to do this. It was my calling more than anything else, and I didn't know it was actually taking me, but I knew that it gave me peace. And I just had to follow the road. And so I quit school. And yes, it was tough because I had to prove myself to a lot of artists who couldn't cope with the fact that they brought their hard-earned session money to be, to have their music produced by a blind young producer. Two things that didn't work in my favor: the fact that I was very young, and the fact that I also, happen to be a blind person in an environment that does not appreciate the abilities of persons living with disabilities. So it was quite interesting. So that made me work many, 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 many more times, as hard or harder than other people in my space. And I think that probably helped to spur me on.
Mm. And that's inspiring in the sense of the determination and your belief in what you loved. You went on this journey now into music, and rather than just being a sort of regular producer putting out what everybody would want to hear, or what the most people would want to hear, you also sort of took a chance on the unconventional. For example, some of the artists that you've worked with, I think Genie was one of those. You worked with Asha, produced Jailer and Fire on the Mountain, I believe, or the whole album.
That is correct. I produced the whole album.
The
Yes.
full Asha's debut album.
Debut album. Yes.
You worked with Bez as well,
and wrote. Yeah. Yes, I did.
yeah. That's interesting because that's not the typical Nigerian sound, at least the stereotypical sound. So what was that like going into that, and also encouraging these unconventional artists to chart that path?
So I think when you're young, you're ambitious. You believe you can take on the world. I don't know that because I just turned 40, and I don't know that at this time of life I would have taken the sort of risks I took at that time. I think for me it wasn't I don't know that I had the presence of mind to even say, what, I'm going to do something that's alternative to the sound that's out there. I just made music that was true for me. I just made music I really believed in. I felt like music had to be enjoyed. I had to make an emotional connection with the music I was making at the time. I had to make a creative connection, a musical connection with the music I was making at the time. So it wasn't just about putting out stuff because people liked the sound of it. I wanted to tell stories. I've always loved country music and rock and all of that. And, here I was sitting with these artists who had the voices that could tell stories, and so this was what I wanted to do. And when you're young and you don't really have responsibilities, you can, like I said, you can do anything. You can take over the world, or take on the world. So that was pretty much what it was for me. I mean, I think of it now in retrospect, and I'm like, oh yeah, well that was pretty cool that you were able to do that and just veer off, on your own less beaten path. But I think the original motivation at the time was not as altruistic and as noble, as novel as it would sound now. It was really me just wanting to just create something, just hear something different, and just create music as I was hearing music at the time. And also, my music had been influenced by these different genres, by this wide spectrum, like I said, and I wanted to pull everything together to create something. So you had Asha's Awe, which would have a little jazz blues background and would have like classical like strings arrangement on it, and would have like a rock bridge, and you had Bez who had all of these, different, a little bit of country and a little bit of soul. And so it was just me expressing the different genres of music that I'd come to appreciate, and just not being hindered by knowing too much. Because sometimes you know too much and you want to fit everything into a box. I just wanted to make music, and I feel like that's always the best place to come from. Not necessarily wanting to fit it into a box or explain why this has to be done that way. And it was just creating something that is true to your art and true to your heart, and giving it a name, giving it a name, or sort of processing it and understanding the whys later sometimes. I mean, of course, you can't always do that with everything in life, but being young and being ambitious gives you that liberty. And I think I took full advantage of that.
Right. Just taking you back on that note to Asha, I'm what they call a stan. So can you describe what that process was like when you first got to work with her?
So Asha and I became friends before we became, musicians. Almost sounded like I was going to say friends before we became lovers, but but yeah, we became friends before we became professional colleagues, sort of working together and making music. And I think that's always a good place to start, because then you've sort of thrown away all of your inhibitions and you're just vibing. So a song like Eyadaba, for instance, was just both of us sitting out on the balcony. There was no power. and I was playing the guitar and she was singing, and we were just singing through a number of folk songs, and she starts to sing this one song, and I just begin to play and form the progression around it. And I'm like, you know what, I think we need to record this. And there we were recording in my friend's BQ, and the stabilizer kept, the power stabilizer kept clicking on and off, and so we had to avoid catching that click, the microphone catching that click, either when I was recording the guitar or her voice and stuff. And so it was just a very natural, very organic process of us just making music that eventually got discovered, and then we went to Paris, and then we recut the record and all of that. But it was a very natural process, two friends, just with a lot of respect for their artistry. I have a lot of respect for Asha as an artist. She's singing and I'm playing, and sometimes I just want to throw the guitar away and just yell, "You're a freaking star, man!" Because she has that magic and that soul, and that And so for me, it's recognizing that and knowing what to do with it as a producer. I think that gave birth to that combination and the synergy, with which we were able to create, the work that we created. So it was from a very good, very organic, very friendly place.
I like that about music, that it doesn't matter whether you're in some place in Lagos with on a mucky, humid day and there's no electricity, and as long as you make good music and make it well, it can go big, like what Ashaz has done.
Oh yeah, it most certainly can.
That's inspiring. And you're also working at the moment, I think you've done a bit to do with film.
I have. I enjoy
What's that
story.
like? What's the how different is that from what you normally do?
It's different in that when you create music, it's you have a constant rhythm throughout the song, which might break occasionally or whatever. Scoring for film is literally pulling from the emotions. It's giving music to the words that are being said, to the emotions being felt, to the facial expressions, everything. It's adding a soundtrack to someone's day. You know what I mean? It's and that soundtrack being able to express all kinds of emotions, whether it's sadness or anger or suspense or pain or fear or horror or whatever it is. And I think it's understanding the power of progressions and chords, and just sort of being able to apply them to create, the right kind of emotional trigger and at the right time. And, the right time, I say, is very important because, for someone like me who is blind, it's important for me to know the actions and sometimes the little nuances and sometimes the little facial, mannerisms and, things like that, to be able to bring that into music in a way that's not overbearing, in a way that doesn't become, hey, this is music, but becomes, something that complements the movie, that drives you to tears in combination with the words and the directing and the cinematography and everything else. So there's quite a lot of work and quite a lot of attention to detail in terms of creating for a movie. Like it's very emotive. It's work. It's a lot of work. And you have to feel it. You have to feel it. So there's a lot I have to do. I read the screenplay. Sometimes I manage to go on set if I can, but if I can't, I get the rushes or whatever. Like I get the edited movie and, I watch it, without music. And listen, watching a movie without music is probably one of the most boring things. Doesn't matter how great the movie is, except it's maybe The Exorcist or something, because that's just on a different level. But, it's that whole experience, sitting down, taking in this movie and trying not to fall asleep, because the music, the music, which is the missing element, depends on you, and right. You need to be able to pull all of those emotions and then use your understanding of, the power of chords and progressions and tempo and rhythm and the lack thereof in certain places, and using certain instruments to accent certain feelings. So it's all about feelings. It's all about how you feel as a creative person, and being able to get the people who would watch the movie to feel that way, with what you create. So you're very, very much in touch, with your feelings and the feelings of the director and the feelings of the actors, the feelings of the character, who you're trying to represent with your music. And, the understanding that sometimes what that particular scene requires is silence, because silence speaks volumes at such a time. So it's really making an emotional connection with the movie in a way that you may not even be required to when, you make actual music. And it takes so much time. So it's work, but it's work that I enjoy. And it's work that I also enjoy as a blind person, because I get a lot of perspective as I go through. So, because of, it's a movie, you have to understand exterior shots, you have to understand, interior shots, you have to understand when things fade to black, you need to understand, just how to approach different things, when they're aerial shots and things like that, or when there's close up, you just need to build a holistic picture in your mind and use this to create sound. So it's a very visual, very holistic experience. It is all encompassing. It requires all of your senses at the same time.
So the script writing has to be really thorough then for you as the scorer to be able to bring out the best in it.
Yeah, it is. But no matter how thorough the script writing is, don't forget that the director also has certain liberties, to or will take certain chances, sort of rewrite the script on set, on the scene, as it were, just to give expression. The actors do in little ways, in very subtle ways, and you also need to be aware of these things, as these changes happen, to be able to accommodate them in the music that you create. It's important to have a thoroughly written script, but it's also important to leave room for interpretation, because interpretation is really what gives it life on the screen, and that's what your music follows for the most part.
I really like the way you've described that, because lately whenever I'm watching films, I tend to switch off to what I'm watching and actually picture the usually an orchestra, and picture them playing, and remember that actually the movie is made up of the visual but also the sound, and you have a whole team and a director, a conductor who's sort of directing the whole orchestra to do that. And as you say, sometimes nothing happens, and it's just the sound that makes an emotion spark as you're watching. So
absolutely,
that's fascinating. So that's sort of one of the range of things you're doing, but I can imagine you also do commercials as well, jingles.
That is correct. I tell people that's my 9 to 5. I cut a lot.
I was going to ask about that, because a lot of producers I know, and not just in Nigeria, but elsewhere in Africa, that tends to be the most consistent form of income.
Yes, it is, because people have to sell goods and services, and those things have to be properly advertised. And you need to understand the psychology of creating, material for the purpose of advertising, of making the material suitable or enticing for those, who need it, and in some cases those who don't. And so you need to understand how to use music and use words to sell a product, to sell a great product, and to make a great product even greater, because of, what you're able to say to it, or because of the kind of, psychological or emotional attachment you're able to create between the buyer and the product. So it's an exciting thing to do, and there's always market for it, because people are forever trying to sell things, and this is one medium that's been known to sell things. So yes, there will always be work in that space, I think, even though the medium of disseminating it might evolve.
But I guess one could also argue that the reason a lot of producers would turn to that is because the conventional music that you put out for artists, the revenue flow is not as well structured as say if you're making jingles and commercials.
Oh yes, there is that. But I mean, even the jingle and commercial space is not as structured, to be honest, because so media buyers, for instance, get paid. You create a material, and 2 years later, for whatever reason, that material has to be reused, the media buyers get paid, and the radio stations get paid and all of that. But we're in an environment where, as the creator of the material, you may not necessarily make, a penny out of that transaction. So, I mean, it does have its own set of structural challenges. But I think the volume of work that continues to come, the pipeline, I think is what makes it exciting. And also the fact that you can begin to do little interesting things like regulate. So for instance, I don't totally give out the stuff that I create in perpetuity. I prefer to license, so that if for whatever reason you have to run it after a couple of years, you pay a little stipend, no matter how small, but you pay something just to license it for a period of time. That way there's a sense of royalty, if you will, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're finding structures in little ways, or trying to structure as we go along. But I think it's in terms of the structure, I think that gig also suffers its own share. But the volume of work is just such that it keeps it coming. It does keep it coming. And well, this is not to say that there aren't the structural challenges you've mentioned in the music space. It really is a challenge. But I feel like it's as it is seen to be more lucrative, it begins to grow. So for instance, you have all these aggregators and value-added service companies coming in, and obviously you have to do a lot of these things on the computer. You need information, you need stats, so yes, it's a space that would be forced to assume some form of structure over time, albeit terribly painfully slow.
You've talked about all this work you do, from the jingles to the film, to just even working on albums and all of that. You've done this for a while. And you've also mentioned your visual impairment. I'm just wondering, how has technology improved the way you work, particularly in let's say 10 years, because a lot has happened over the last decade or so?
I don't know that I can fully emphasize the importance of technology in what I do, or how it's been able to greatly improve my ability to function independently where necessary. And I say where necessary because as a producer, it's kind of like flying a plane. The fact that, you understand aerodynamics and all of those good things does not mean that, you want to be left on your own flying a 777 or a A380. And so I have assistance that doesn't just come as a result of my being a blind person, but because it just comes with the nature of, the work that I do, and just the mental capacity and the need for people to just, help do other things. So in that sense, I get to work with a lot of engineers. But in terms of the things that I'm able to do, by myself and on my own in the studio, technology has played a very, very, very important role, and continues to, obviously with the evolution of such opportunities and equipment like text-to-speech engine. So you go and buy a Mac right now, and you can literally just launch VoiceOver and get on Pro Tools, and as long as you know the keystrokes and things, you know what to do. You can get cracking. And of course, not to mention AI, which just simplifies a lot of the things in terms of intelligently helping you to navigate areas that ordinarily you'd need maybe a sighted person to navigate on screen, and things like that. So yes, technology has greatly improved how I've been able to work and how I've been able to create music, and just given me a sense of independence. But I guess because I'm just a big collaborative person, I still prefer to have my engineers in the studio. And maybe because I'm a little lazy, I like other people to do the cable work, to be honest. I don't think I'm going to get a medal as the guy who the best cable runner or whatever. So yeah, I might understand the tricks of doing it, but I'm very happy to have someone else do it for pay. It just makes life easy. But technology definitely has done a lot in terms of what I'm able to independently do myself.
Does that also affect the sort of hardware you work with, or are there some things that are simplified, or I don't know, is there something that significantly changed?
Well, not as much is significantly changed in terms of the hardware space. If anything, it's probably become somewhat complicated. So, for instance, where you'd work on a board, on a console, where you have obviously your gain staging and all your parameters in front of you. So your EQs and your compressors and things, represented by the touch of a button. We've kind of moved into this digital space where you have one knob that can work as you can use for gain staging, you can also use for EQ, you can also use to compress, and you can also use to add effects, and all of these different things. And so it gets tricky because these things don't talk back to you or have any way of you telling. So you actually have to memorize specific keystrokes to say, okay, so once you get into the menu area and you push a certain button down twice, you're probably in the effects section, or you push your arrow key the 3 times and you're in the compression section, or you're in the processing, whatever. So you have to memorize those things just to make your life easy. But again, for me, that's where my engineers come in, because really I'd rather focus on sort of the creative side of things and directing people, because that's really my work as a producer. I'm more of a producer than I am an engineer now, because I have learned to engineer myself. That's something I can do. But in order to give my best, it's best for me to be the captain of the ship and not necessarily try to be the first officer with his hands on the controls all the time. So I guess I'm saved by that to some degree. But I feel like that's an area where we can still use a lot of technological improvement in the hardware section, especially for blind persons who work on their own. There are ways around these things. So, for instance, if you worked with a Pro Tools enabled controller, it means that what you do on your console can probably be read aloud by voiceover on your screen and things like that. Right. So if you use your console as a digital audio workstation, then it creates a different environment where you are more in control. But if you're using an independent console, just by itself, then you're going to need a little more assistance, or just a little more understanding of how to navigate that area in just pure silence and stuff like that, and inputs and outputs and things like that. So yeah, I think in that department, we can still use a lot of sort of technological advancement. I don't know how much the demand for it is, because I also know that technology is also a function of, what the demand is, which is why text to screen and text to speech synthesizers were extremely expensive before obviously Apple came and crashed the prices of such things down. So yeah, we still deal with such issues and the issues of demand and things like that. But
are you able to provide feedback to some of these companies?
So I've because I work more with like Apple, who have been on the forefront of just making things a lot more comfortable. And I'm not as familiar with some of these other. So Job Access with Speech, Hunter Joyce would have been the people I'd have loved to provide feedback, but I don't use their material as such. And so, no, I haven't done much by way of feedback. With Apple, yes, I have. I mean, every time I get a chance to go on a forum or whatever to contribute, I always do, because Apple has been really, really helpful, just helpful in terms of advancing the cause of persons living with disabilities, who function in different areas, whether it's tech or the creative or whatever. It's they've been just gloriously wonderful as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, that's good to hear. So you said you're working on this album. When are you planning to put this out, and is there more to expect?
We don't have a release date yet, so we're going to put out a few singles. And then we'll put out the album. I'm really excited about it. The goal is to communicate the release plan, at this point, I'm creating, which I think is a very, very exciting time, in the process. And I'm enjoying that, and then of course, there's all the back end work that needs to happen, that is happening very actively, just to, get the material ready for distribution and so on and so forth. So yeah, I can't share information in terms of when it would be out, but very soon, more than likely this year. But I expect a couple singles to begin to happen anytime from, say, within a month or so.
Just wondering what your thoughts are on the sort of mainstream recognition that Nigerian pop music is getting.
I think it is good for Nigeria. I think we have the ears of the world. And I'm really excited. It's an exciting time to be creating music. it's also an exciting time for something to be able to redirect the narrative of Nigeria and Nigerians, around the world. I feel like music and medicine, especially in America, or doctors in America, for instance, have really helped to do that. I just wonder how intentional we are as a people about that, and how much we're taking advantage of that to advance ourselves, to create a system to commercialize the opportunity, and to continue to provide these services, so that we're not just riding a wave that disappears and leaves us stunned and wondering, where did it all go? So I think for me, that's really the important thing. It's definitely exciting. I'm happy to know that this is happening in this time. I would just like to know that, we're being intentional. We're being intentional about it.
Okay, that's good to hear, and I think that's a profound note to leave it on. So, Cobhams Asuquo, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you, Tomi. It was lovely talking to you.
And that's how the conversation goes here on Milepost. If you like this, please leave a generous rating on your podcast app and share with someone who you think would enjoy this. That's it for now. I'm Tomi Oladipo, and until the next one, cheers!